G'day, welcome back to the channel. Sad day today for anybody who used a product made by Sir Clive Sinclair, probably back in the 1980s. He was a visionary man. He saw the future and he tried to make it a reality. And sometimes he succeeded, sometimes he failed, but he gave it a go. And that's the main thing. That's a lesson we could all learn. You must try, even if you do not succeed. The only failure is to not have tried at all. So the BBC here is carrying the story Sir Clive Sinclair, computing pioneer, dies aged 81. Now, as I said, he had some successes, he had some failures. And this is a really good picture, actually, because this shows what was deemed to be one of his failures. This is the Sinclair C5 electric vehicle. Yeah, now we think Elon Musk pioneered electric vehicles. No. Sir Clive Sinclair was out there nearly 40 years ahead of Elon Musk. Now, you may be laughing. Don't laugh. This looks like a pedal car. It looks like a child's toy, but it was much more than that. Now, sure, it was pretty basic. It was pretty poorly built. The quality control was pretty crap, and it may have been powered by a repurposed washing machine motor, but it created a path. It blazed a trail for those that came afterwards. And no, I'm not talking about the Tesla. I'm not talking about Elon Musk, because this was never designed to be an electric car. It was a one-purpose electric commuting vehicle. It's slightly different. And to show you how far ahead of his time was, this has become a reality for millions of people around the world today. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. This is what I'm talking about. Sir Clive Sinclair actually, perhaps unknowingly, invented the mobility scooter, the electric mobility scooter. Single person, short range commuting vehicle powered by electricity. This is what he invented. This is what it looks like today. But back in the day, that's what he created. People laughed at him. People derided him and threw scorn upon him because this was such a crappy thing. Hey, this is the UK and we have winters that are so cold and rain and wet and windy. You would not want to be sitting in this thing in the middle of traffic. And by and large, that was true. But now we have mobility scooters that tend to drive on the sidewalk, on the footpath. And they're part of life. They're a part of life for many people. Fortunately, not for me yet, but for many people. So Sir Clive Sinclair, as I say, he was a visionary. But if we go back to the early days of Sir Clive Sinclair, he did some amazing stuff. He made things affordable. Things that were otherwise unaffordable, he made them affordable by building to a price. And I'm going to show you a couple of those things. What have we got here? This is probably the first time I came across Sir Clive Sinclair's products, the Black Watch Kit. I remember in the mid-1970s walking through town and spying the first digital watch I'd ever seen in the window of a jeweler. Here it was just a gold band and a gold face or gold surround with a red circular face, and you could see nothing. It was just blank. And I thought, ooh, that's interesting. And I even got a demonstration of it and it had a little button on the side. When you pressed it, the red face, suddenly some numbers, some digits appeared in it, tiny little numbers, and that told you the time. 7-segment red LEDs illuminated, and you could see the time. It was brilliant. I thought, this is fantastic. The miniaturization and so forth. But it was $400, which is the equivalent of $1,600 today. So it was a lot of money, far more than I could afford. So you can imagine my glee, my joy when I saw this ad where I could get my own digital watch with those fancy 7-segment LED displays for just $30. And even better, I could build it myself. It was a kit. I could actually assemble it and build it myself. Wow. So I could tell people, look, I've got a really flash digital watch and I built it. Now, I didn't actually order one of these because it was very difficult to import stuff back in those days, and they were from the UK. But we can see what it looked like here. And as I said, Sir Clive's products were built down to a price. From that ad, it looked pretty damn schmick. Look at that. That looks pretty damn smart, doesn't it? But in reality, if we look at that, it's pretty damn crappy. It's cheap, flexible, horrible plastic. Those 7-segment LEDs, they're not so bright when you look at them in real life. That's pretty dim. You have to shade the watch with your hand to actually see what it says if you're outside. And it was built down to a price in so many ways. You can see from this just how thin the plastic was. There's no quality, no substance in that at all. And even things like the buttons. If we look here, these are where the buttons go. They've just got bits of silver film stuck to the plastic, and those bits of silver film then contact, if I can find a right picture. Where's the picture? Here we go. Those bits of silver film short out some contacts on the circuit board to make the connection. So these watches were not very good. Let me be diplomatic. Say they were not very good. They neither were quality, they weren't durable, and they just didn't perform very well. But they were $30. So hey, who cares? They were $30. They were less than a tenth the price of a real expense or any other digital watch on the market. So people bought them, people built them, people loved them, then people threw them away because they stopped working. But it created a market. And Sir Clive was so innovative to even produce this, to even think of coming up with this for this price. It's such an incredibly low price. But he did it also with calculators. Where are we? We got it. I've got it somewhere. Here we go. The Sinclair, or they called themselves Cambridge at this stage. Now, this is an error. Let me see. I should have had this scrolled down, but I was checking. Here we go. The Sinclair Cambridge calculator, $25 or £25, depending on where you lived. And this was an era when calculators were just coming in. They were just new. And I was still using a slide rule and pencil and paper to do all my complicated maths. And it was very slow, laborious, or log tables. That's what we had before the calculator came in. It was a really, really hard work to do math. These things came along. Suddenly you could add, multiply, divide, subtract in the blink, the literal blink of an eye. So they were just fantastic. Now, HP was there, but their products were so expensive. So the Sinclair calculator kit, again, like the watch, I could have an expensive, what would otherwise have been an expensive digital calculator, electronic calculator in my hands for $25. And I could build it myself because being a geek, putting it together yourself is half the fun. So you could get this kit, the Cambridge electronic calculator kit, and it had circuit board, it had components, and it had the plastic case. And you went through simple instructions, soldered a few bits, these bits soldered them onto the board, put the IC on the board, there you go, you can see, all came together. And finally, what you ended up with was this, the calculator itself. See those 7-segment LEDs there? They're absolutely brilliant. But as I keep saying, all his products were built down to a price. The reason this was only $25 becomes pretty apparent when you start looking a little closer. Look at that number 9 button. Look at the angle it's on. It will have jammed. Those buttons just were terrible, absolutely terrible. Yes, it was a 4-function calculator. Yes, it worked. But no, it didn't work very damn well after a little while. And they most of them stopped working after not very long at all. But it was only $25. Who gives a damn? That's amazing. So Clive Sinclair was able to take things that were otherwise really expensive and make them really cheap. And crappy, but really cheap. And that was great. People liked that. So they bought a lot of his products. And then, of course, about the time, mid-1970s, late 1970s, computers came along. Personal computers came along. If we look at what the early personal computers looked like, they looked like this. Let me just go back a page here. If you wanted a personal computer in 1975, this was pretty much your only option. It was the Altair 8800. Had an 8080 processor, and it was a box. It was a box. Now, you could buy it in kit form for $439 US, which is about $1,800 in today's money, or you could buy it built, assembled for $621 US, which is about $3,200 US today. So it was very, very expensive. I mean, you look at, especially when you consider what you're getting. Once you'd built this thing, once you'd put it together, this is what you got. A box with a front panel with some lights and some switches. That was it. There was no keyboard. There was no display. There was not even any way to plug a display into it. There was no way to plug a keyboard into it. It was just a box with a processor, a tiny bit of memory, and these lights and switches. That was it. That's all you got for your equivalent of $3,200 in today's money. Amazing. So, as you can imagine, personal computing was the realm of those who were rich enough and interested enough to build one. Because even once you'd bought this, what could you do with it? Well, you couldn't do very much at all. You had to program it by flicking the switches, and you had to interpret the output by reading the lights. So even a simple program just to make one of the LEDs flash off and on, you could spend hours writing that and loading it in and then making it run just to make a little light blink off and on. So it was popular in certain circles, but it wasn't today's personal computers as we know it. Something had to change. And of course, we had computers like the Apple start to come out after that with a real keyboard. And you could plug your TV in. And so that's when the personal computer really became a product you could use in your home and people could actually use. You could program the Apple in BASIC, and it really became very popular. But there was one problem with the Apple computer and the other ones like the Radio Shack and the Ataris. They were very, very expensive. They were quite expensive. I know in this part of the world, they were over $1,000, thousands of dollars to get an Apple II set up and running. And again, that was a huge, and this was $1975, $1978, $1979, which in the case of an Apple, you're looking at the equivalent of $10,000 today to get an Apple II going at home. Ridiculous price. Very few people could afford that. So what happened was this. Sir Clive Sinclair, he did it again. He made the Sinclair ZX80. He took something that was otherwise very expensive and made it really cheap. This thing sold for £99, $99. And just like the Apple, it has a keyboard. You can plug it into your television set. You can program it in BASIC. But it's a fraction the cost, a tiny fraction the cost. How did he do this? How could he do this? Well, one thing you'll notice is that I think this was almost vacuum formed plastic. The case was very, very shabby, very weak and flexible. The keyboard was a membrane keyboard, so it wasn't a proper clicky keyboard. It was just a membrane keyboard, which meant it wasn't very nice to use. Sometimes the keys didn't work properly. But hey, for the low price, who really cared? And you might say, how did he manage to make these computers so damn cheap, apart from cheaping out on the plastic? Well, I'll show you how. This is the inside of a Sinclair ZX80. You notice, there's a handful of chips and the big processor chip and a ROM chip here. And then you've got a video modulator here so you can plug it into your television set. So, and a membrane keyboard. This is what you got for your $99. You think, oh, okay. So let's have a look at the competing product. Why was the Apple so much more expensive? Well, I'm going to show you what was inside an Apple. Look at that. This is two boards, so just one of these boards. Look how much extra componentry was in an Apple. This is why it cost 10 times as much. There was much more stuff in it. But then you got to stop and think, well, how come Apple had to use all these chips when Sinclair only used that many chips? How did he manage it? Well, as I say, he was a very clever man. He realized that there were two ways to build a computer. You could go the Apple route, and which virtually every other manufacturer was doing, and you have a chip for your keyboard, and a chip to do your video display, and a chip to make the sound. And so you have separate chips for all the operations in a central processor here. Now, all those chips cost money. What Sinclair realized was, if we write some software, we can use the main processor to create the video display. We can use the main processor to check the keyboard. We can use the main processor to make the sound. So he did in software what everyone else was doing in hardware. And of course, the beauty of software is if you build a computer and sell it to the market, you only have to write the software once. And then every time you sell a computer, you just copy it. Copy this software. It costs you nothing to copy your software once you've written it. But if you're building an Apple, every time you sell a computer, you've got to buy all these chips and put them in and sell all those chips. So naturally, the per unit cost is much higher when you've got to have much more stuff in it. So Sinclair simply put the time and effort into developing software, and then basically the hardware was so cheap, he could sell them for $99. But as always, with the Sinclair products, it was pretty crappy. It was no Apple II. But at that stage, people didn't really care because it worked. They could buy this thing from the high street store, take it home, plug it into their television, plug it into the wall, buy a magazine from the local shop, get a program listing, type it in, and play a game, or balance their checkbook, or do whatever they wanted to do with a personal computer, exactly like you would with an Apple. It's just that this didn't work quite so well. Every time you pressed a key, the screen flashed, because in order to check the keyboard to see what key had been pressed, it had to stop creating a picture on the screen just for a moment while it checked the keyboard. Then it would come back. So the screen would flicker and flash when you were typing on the keyboard. And all sorts of things like that would happen. It was a real big compromise, but it was a compromise many, many people were happy to accept for the massively reduced price compared to other products on the market. So Sir Clive, he did a really good job at taking expensive stuff, simplifying it, making it crappy, and selling it to people who couldn't afford anything better. That was visionary. That was brilliant. That is a great business model, because obviously it worked. He was very successful in what he did. But as I say, he did have some failures, although they weren't necessarily failures. The C5 that we looked at back here, it wasn't a failure. It was just decades ahead of its time, because it was one of those in disguise. Another thing that he made was a television set. He made two of them. He made this one, the MTV1, which was an attempt to give people a truly portable pocket television set. So he made the electronics as small as possible, and then it had this cathode ray tube here, like the old television sets, cathode ray tube. But of course it meant it was very deep and quite bulky, and so it didn't really sell. The technology wasn't there for pocket television sets at this stage. But he also made this one, which was a flat screen television. In fact, if I can get a slightly side-on picture of it, I don't think I can. But it didn't have that big CRT, that cathode ray tube poking out the back. It was actually really innovative what he did. I'll just find a picture here. He designed a different cathode ray tube like this, which was a sideways one. So basically all the filament and the electron gun was over on the right-hand side here, and it fired its electron beam across the screen there, hit it at a very shallow angle, and produced an image on this piece of phosphor here. So the thickness of the device was not very big. It wasn't very thick at all. It was quite thin. And it made a much better form factor. But again, unfortunately, it was just too ahead of its time, because any kind of cathode ray tube is going to suck a huge amount of energy from a battery. And batteries, we only had dry cell batteries and really poor rechargeables back then, so it just didn't have the battery life, and it was expensive. These things were expensive to make. It just was not a good fit with the market. Of course, subsequently, we've had true pocket portable television sets from Casio and Panasonic and a raft of other manufacturers who waited until there were things like LCD displays to come up with these devices that became truly practical. So Clive was, again, just a bit ahead of his time. So that's it. That's Sir Clive, a brief, in a nutshell, Sir Clive Sinclair and his history and some of the products he made and some of the successes and some of the failures and some of the reasons why. And one of the reasons I'm sad to see Sir Clive pass was because he was one of a dying generation, a dying breed of entrepreneurs. Now, when he developed the watch and the calculator and the ZX80, he was there at the coalface. He was designing electronic circuitry. He was writing computer code. He was packaging things up. He was selling stuff. He was doing everything. He was the one-man band, the entrepreneur who was able to do this. And today, that potential to do that is almost gone. If we look at the current entrepreneurs, we've got Elon Musk. Now, Elon doesn't design anything to do with the Tesla. He's not an engineer. He doesn't write any code. He doesn't create any electronics. He sits behind a desk and hires people to do that for him. He doesn't build spaceships. He hires the people at SpaceX to do that for him. So he's not a cutting coalface techie entrepreneur. He's a businessman. Same goes for people like Jeff Bezos. He's got his space operation. He's got his Amazon Web Services, and he doesn't cut any code. He doesn't weld any bits of metal together. He doesn't write anything. He just sits there behind a desk and hires the right people to do the job. That's the way the world has gone. That's what we have to do these days because everything has become so damn complex. Now, we saw that Sinclair ZX80, how simple that is. One person could easily design that. They could easily write the code to make it work. If you compare that to today's modern technology, just no way. There's no way one person can do that stuff. So you have to have a team of hardware engineers, a team of software developers, a team of marketers, all that sort of stuff. And that requires money. So if one person has an idea, they're going to go out and find a whole lot of money to hire people to do that for them. And that's a shame because I miss the days when anyone working in a garage with enough dedication, sweat, knowledge could make a world-changing product. It's probably not going to happen again. But that's it. The world changes. Live with the change. The only constant in life is change. And again, this is a timely reminder to all of us that none of us make it out of this game alive. We're all going to die at some stage. So live each day as if it is your last. Carpe diem. Because one day you will be right. And that's another video from me. I hope you enjoyed that. Now, if you had a Sinclair product growing up or even more recently, tell us about it. Go down to the comments. Did you have one of those watches? Did you have one of those calculators? How long did it last? Did you enjoy putting it together or did you opt for the pre-built version? Did you have a C5? Are you still using your C5 to commute the hour to work and back? I don't know. But I'd really like to hear from people who had the same experiences as me and admired Sir Clive Sinclair for what he did. So there you go. Thank you for watching this video. Sorry it wasn't my usual fare, but this was a really important day in the history of technology. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.